Tonight, the man who tried to kill a president wins a big court victory. John Hinckley will taste some freedom. His victims are outraged. The head of the 9/11 investigation promises major revelations and tells CBS News the attacks could have been prevented. The potential risk of a popular asthma drug. Why people who take it didn't know of its danger. We'll give you the inside story. And the black daughter of segregationist Thurmond. Why didn't she tell him off? You'll hear her answer in a CBS exclusive interview.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. He tried to murder the President of the United States and very nearly succeeded. But a jury said he was not guilty by reason of insanity. Now, nearly 23 years later, a federal judge has decided John Hinckley Jr., the man who shot President Reagan, should get what he wants, that he is well enough now to leave a mental hospital on his own to visit his parents. The judge said that with certain restrictions, Hinckley, now 48 years old, would not pose a danger to himself or anyone else. CBS's John Roberts has more about today's ruling and what it will mean.
It is a small step toward freedom for the man who shot President Reagan. The judge today ruled that John Hinckley will be allowed 6 unsupervised daytime visits with his parents. Then if they go well, 2 overnight visits. But the judge denied Hinckley's request to travel to his parents' home in Williamsburg, Virginia, ordering the visits must take place within a 50-mile radius of Washington, D.C. Hinckley must remain in his parents' company at all times and stay away from former girlfriend and fellow patient Leslie DeVoe because he won't reveal what their relationship is.
Mr. President!
Hinckley was found not guilty by reason of insanity for the assassination attempt on President Reagan and for shooting his press secretary James Brady and 2 others. For the past 21 years, Hinckley has lived at St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington. Brady's wife Sarah and the Reagan family have vigorously fought Hinckley's limited release. In a written statement, Nancy Reagan today said, "My family and I are very disappointed by the judge's ruling. We continue to fear for the safety of the general public. Our thoughts are with all of Mr. Hinckley's victims today, especially Jim Brady and his family, as they must continue to live with the tragic consequences of the assassination attempt." For years, the courts rejected Hinckley's petitions for release, agreeing with the government's contention that he still represents a danger, though a 1999 court ruling did allow Hinckley supervised visits to a bowling alley, theater, and a mall. In granting the hospital's proposal for unsupervised visits, the judge today accepted the findings of multiple psychiatrists who say Hinckley's psychosis and depression are now in full remission. But in its case opposing the visits, the Justice Department cited Hinckley's own 1987 journal in which he wrote, "Psychiatry is a guessing game, and I do my best to keep the fools guessing about me. They will never know the true John Hinckley."
It's for that reason that the Secret Service, which still has Hinckley on a watch list of potential threats against the president, plans to keep a very close eye on him every time he leaves the hospital. Dan?
John Roberts reporting live from the White House. The U.S. State Department today put out a new warning about possible terror attacks in Saudi Arabia. Citing what are called indications of terrorist threats, it is urging but not ordering non-essential American diplomats, families of U.S. officials, and all other Americans in Saudi Arabia to leave. The head of the independent commission investigating the 9/11 terror attacks in the United States is out with some strong accusations about what the panel is finding. The final report is due out officially in May. CBS's Randall Pinkston has tonight's story.
This is a very, very important part of history, and we got to tell it right.
For the first time, Commission Chairman Tom Kean is saying publicly that 9/11 could have and should have been prevented.
I do not believe it had to happen.
Appointed by President Bush, Kean is now pointing fingers inside the administration and laying blame.
Do you think someone or some ones should have been fired?
There were people, certainly, if I was doing the job, who would certainly not be in a position that they were in at that time, because they failed. They simply failed.
In our investigation
To find out who failed and why, the commission has navigated a political minefield, threatening a subpoena to gain access to the president's top secret daily briefs, documents that may shed light on one of the most controversial assertions of the Bush administration.
I don't think anybody could have predicted
that they would try to use an airplane as a missile, a hijacked airplane as a missile.
How is it possible we have a national security advisor coming out and saying we had no idea they could use planes as weapons when we have FBI records back to '91 stating that this was a possibility?
Kristen Breitweiser is one of 4 New Jersey widows who lobbied Congress and the president to appoint the commission. The widows want to know why government agencies didn't connect the dots until September 11th on tips like warnings from FBI offices about suspicious student pilots.
If you were to tell me that 2 years past the murder of my husband on live national television, I still wouldn't have one question answered, I wouldn't believe it.
Kane admits the commission also has more questions than answers.
Today, we don't know whether the same people who were sitting in the decision-making spots on that critical day are still in those positions.
That's correct.
Shouldn't we at least know whether...
Yes. Answer is yes. And we will.
Kane promises major revelations in public testimony beginning next month from top officials in the FBI, CIA, Defense Department, National Security Agency, and maybe President Bush and former President Clinton. Randall Pinkston, CBS News, New York.
Iraq's U.S.-appointed governing council held preliminary talks today on setting up a war crimes tribunal to try Saddam Hussein once CIA interrogators are through with him. CBS's Kimberly Dozier reports tonight that information gained through Saddam's capture is already providing useful material to American troops.
U.S. forces hit hard overnight in the pro-Saddam town of Samara, arresting a dozen militant suspects. Guerrilla fighters there had tried to ambush soldiers on Monday. There were also raids in another part of the Sunni Triangle, the pro-Saddam town of Baquba, where U.S. troops are attacked almost every day. The arrests are all part of a crackdown thanks to intelligence gained from documents captured with Saddam Hussein. They show that former regime members were helping direct terror against the coalition. U.S. troops already caught at least one former Iraqi officer Monday, who they believe was coordinating up to 14 terror cells within Baghdad, all part of the group that calls itself Muhammad's Army. Many of the cells had already been broken up as part of Operation Iron Justice in the past several weeks.
The capture of Saddam Hussein has given U.S. troops a morale boost and given their commanders a new edge in their hunt for insurgents. The number of attacks inside Baghdad has even dropped slightly. But for your average soldier, day-to-day life hasn't changed.
They remain vigilant for the next terrorist attempt. They know there are still plenty of enemies left to fight. In this Baghdad neighborhood, the last place Saddam appeared in public before the city fell, an angry crowd mourned the capture of their former leader and the death of a hometown hero, a local man who died attacking American forces.
The people of Iraq is hate Bush.
There are many volunteers here ready to pick up the dead man's gun and fight. Kimberly Dozier, CBS News, Baghdad.
Dr. N, former Governor Howard Dean, frontrunner for the Democratic presidential nomination, is an outspoken opponent of President Bush's war leadership, but it appears his standing among Democratic voters has not been hurt by the capture of Saddam. A CBS News New York Times poll out tonight indicates his support holding steady at 23%. Still, as CBS's Jim Axelrod reports, some of Dean's opponents now have a new issue to use against him.
Howard Dean is between a rock and a hard place. While the president enjoys basking in the post-capture glow.
Let me be very clear. My position on the war in Iraq has not changed.
Dean's post-capture comments continued criticism of Mr. Bush during a time of bipartisan praise.
Saddam's apprehension, which could have taken place 6 months ago, does not end our security challenges.
Have made him more of a target for fellow Democrats than the president.
Howard Dean has climbed into his own spider hole of denial.
Take this ad.
We live in a very dangerous world.
From a democratically funded special interest group slamming Dean's foreign policy inexperience. That's life as a frontrunner.
They want to destroy Howard Dean, and nothing else has worked. And they believe that Howard Dean's, weakness right now is on national security.
And while Dean may find comfort in poll numbers that show his stance hasn't hurt him with the Democrats and the $500,000 he's raised on the internet since the ad, he knows the pounding will continue.
I didn't expect to have all the other candidates flailing away at me because I didn't expect to be the front runner here. That certainly taught me some new perspectives about human nature.
Even though late today that ad attacking Dean was pulled, there still couldn't be anyone more delighted watching the Democrats beat up their front-runner over Mr. Bush's success than Mr. Bush himself. As far as he's concerned, it doesn't get any better than this. A possible opponent gets smacked around, and he doesn't even have to lift a finger. Dan?
Jim Axelrod, thanks. A long-running political and religious controversy deepened today in France. President Chirac proposed a new law to ban religious symbols in French schools and regulate them in the workplace. The proposal is largely aimed at headscarves worn increasingly by Muslim women and girls, but would also apply to Jewish skullcaps and large Christian crosses. On the CBS Market Watch, federal regulators today approved an overhaul of the New York Stock Exchange, rocked earlier this year when then Chairman Dick Grasso's huge pay package became public. Grasso was forced out. Under this new plan, the New York Stock Exchange power is to be divided between a chairman and a CEO. Stocks closed mixed today. Small gain for the Dow, small loss for the NASDAQ. Coming up next on the CBS Evening News, could a popular asthma medicine actually trigger attacks or in some cases even cause death? CBS investigates for tonight's Inside Story, and then later, they call them sports hot dogs. Athletes with a love of self-promotion. Have some of their pre-planned stunts gotten way out of hand? This is shaping up as a deadlier than normal flu season for children, and in the western states, maybe the deadliest in over 30 years. This is according to government and other flu experts who predict infant and toddler flu deaths will exceed the 92 in an average year. So far, the CDC has learned of some 36 flu deaths among children and teenagers. In getting flu shots, top priority goes to anyone of any age with asthma or other chronic health conditions. Many of the 16 million Americans who suffer from asthma rely on the popular drug Advair to relieve their symptoms. But they use the drug unwarned of its potential dangers, as CBS's Cheryl Atkinson reports for tonight's Inside Story.
Jim and Star Chavez didn't think twice when their doctor prescribed Advair for their son Ethan. The Advair, inhaled daily, was supposed to prevent his occasional mild asthma attacks. Instead, shortly after he started using Advair, Ethan collapsed.
He was totally lifeless. His eyes were rolled back in his head, and it was really terrifying.
I shook him, and I kept on shaking him, and I kept on yelling his name, Ethan, Ethan, wake up, and he wouldn't respond at all.
They didn't know it then, but asthma patients taking the same medicine in a study were dying in unexpected numbers. Drug maker GlaxoSmithKline led the study of salmeterol, the medicine in Advair and another Glaxo asthma product, Ceravent. Designed to relieve asthma, it seemed to trigger fatal attacks in some. 3 times more patients taking the medicine died of asthma than those not taking it. A safety monitoring board took one look at the deaths and shut down Glaxo's study. The FDA recently forced Glaxo to disclose the small but significant risk of death in a black box warning on its medicine and in ads.
Rare but serious asthma episodes and asthma-related fatalities occurred
in the study, Glaxo found deaths among blacks were highest, though white deaths were also elevated. Glaxo then sent out a carefully worded message that led some to believe white patients need not worry.
These risks may be greater in African Americans.
Yet CBS News has learned a study of the medicine 10 years ago in only white patients also found an increase in asthma deaths. Glaxo dismissed the deaths back then as probably due to the disease rather than the treatment.
Most people who use Advair have no serious problems, and the FDA says benefits outweigh risks. Despite the new warnings, sales have increased, approaching $2 billion a year. And that black box warning ordered for Advair 4 months ago still isn't on the product. The FDA says Glaxo negotiated when it will be, but won't tell us the date. Ethan has fully recovered from his trauma, and the whole family's breathing easier without the asthma remedy that may have been worse than the disease. Cheryl Atkinson, CBS News, Washington.
Next on the CBS Evening News, he was a hardline segregationist. She is his mixed-race daughter. Coming up, the Strom Thurmond she knew. In more of our exclusive CBS in-depth interview with Essie Mae Washington Williams. We have more tonight on a story about America and Race, a story that was a secret for many years. The story of the late Senator Strom Thurmond's biracial daughter. After Essie Mae Washington Williams revealed her heritage this week, I spoke in depth with her in an exclusive interview for 60 Minutes 2 later tonight. She says she now feels a great sense of peace. Senator Strom Thurmond's daughter returned to her native South Carolina this morning to applause.
My children deserve the right to know from whom, where, and what they have come.
Facing reporters, Williams, a 78-year-old retired California schoolteacher, took on her biological father's racist past.
I certainly never did like the idea of his being a segregationist, but that was his life, and wasn't anything I could do about that.
In your mind and heart, was he a racist?
I don't know that at heart he was. I think he did what he did to promote his career.
Senator Thurmond met his daughter for the first time in 1941, just before his political career took off. He supported her financially and met with her regularly, all the while leading a national struggle to enforce segregation and defeat civil rights legislation. Were you ever tempted to tell him off? To say, listen, you're wrong about these things?
No, not really, except the one time that I did ask about what was best for his career.
Strom Thurmond went on to serve 48 years in the United States Senate, and while he moderated his views on segregation, he never publicly acknowledged his black daughter.
I would like to be remembered as one who cares.
Today, his daughter did what he could not.
I am Essie Mae Washington Williams, and at last, I feel completely free.
We invite you to hear more of her story and that exclusive interview in depth and with context and perspective on 60 Minutes 2, tonight at 8, 7 Central, here on CBS. Today was the 100th anniversary of the Wright brothers' historic first powered flight, and at rainy Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, an exact replica of the original wood and fabric flyer was launched in an effort to duplicate the feat, but it wound up in a puddle, demonstrating just how difficult flying was a century ago. Still to come on tonight's CBS Evening News, it started as an end zone celebration dance. Now some players are doing pre-planned stunts that smack heavily of self-promotion. Has this all gone too far? Stay tuned.
First it was Dodge Durangos, now it's Dodge Dakotas. Ball joint problems that sometimes lead to this. Our investigation continues tomorrow on the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
And is exploding the attention-grabbing behavior and taunting of pro athletes, not during the play, but after it. The self-serving showboating just keeps spreading. Bob McNamara reports that in the most recent example, it wasn't a referee making the call, but a player.
It was one of Joe Horn's 4 New Orleans touchdowns. But when he pulled a pre-planted cell phone from a goalpost, made a choreographed call to celebrate, Horn became the latest poster boy for sports hot dogs and was fined $30,000 by the National Football League.
It's like a premeditated act of moronic proportions that just doesn't make any sense.
I shouldn't have done that, and I apologize to the guys or anyone else I offended by it.
But Horn wasn't Sunday's only showboat.
Throw to the end zone.
Cincinnati receiver Chad Johnson pulled a pre-positioned sign from a snowbank, a message to the NFL not to fine him, but it did. $10,000.
If people like those kinds of things, then they ought to watch pro wrestling.
Big rush, Gastineau.
The New York Jets' Mark Gastineau was one of the first sultans of jock schlock. Icky Woods had the Icky Shuffle. Green Bay, the Lambeau Leap. But it was San Francisco's Terrell Owens pulling a felt-tip pen from a sock and autographing a touchdown catch last season. That's when the prop-assisted self-promotion got contagious.
It's about a number of individuals today that almost have an I, me, mine, look at me, it's about me virus.
Today, few sports, it seems, are immune to pre-planned stunts and milking the primetime glory to turn it into gold. Perhaps the only arena where the clowns are real anymore is where the real cowboys play. Bob McNamara, CBS News, Dallas.
Setting examples for young players, part of our world. I'll be back later this evening with 60 Minutes 2. Our exclusive interview with Essie Mae Williams, Strom Thurmond's black daughter, and Scott Pelley goes inside Saddam's spider hole with a camera.
Then on 48 Hours Investigates, a carefree party. Suddenly, the porch collapses. 13 are dead. An accident, or is someone to blame?
48 Hours Investigates and 60 Minutes too, tonight, coming up shortly here on CBS. For the CBS Evening News, Dan Rather reporting. Back in a few on 62.
For news 24 hours a day, click on cbsnews.com. Brought to you in part by Walmart. Giving, helping, doing. Because we live here too, and we believe good works. What's wrong with ball joints on a popular pickup? We investigate tomorrow. Experience CBS News.